The space station called Meridian Point was full of noise and movement. Thousands of different alien species walked through the bright metal hallways. They came here to buy and sell goods from across the galaxy. Ships arrived and left every hour, carrying people and cargo to distant worlds. In the middle of all this activity, one figure moved alone through the crowds. She was a Kalari, a cat-like alien with fur that should have been silver or gold like others of her kind. But her fur was pure white with pale blue stripes running down her back and legs. She held two tiny cubs wrapped in old cloth against her chest. The babies were only a few weeks old, and they had the same white fur as their mother. Her name was Lyra. Everywhere she walked, people moved away from her. Other Kalari turned their backs when they saw her coming. Their ears went flat against their heads in disgust. Even aliens from different planets avoided her. They had learned from Kalari traders that white-furred Kalari were bad luck. The Kalari people believed that white fur meant genetic corruption and brought misfortune to everyone nearby. Lyra had been traveling for 3 weeks. She had run away from her home planet where the Council of Elders had ordered her to give up her cubs. They would be taken to a temple and she would never see them again. This was what happened to all white-furred Kalari. The ancient traditions said they were wrong, that they should not exist. Lyra had sold everything she owned to buy passage on a cargo ship. She escaped in the middle of the night while everyone slept. Now she was stuck on Meridian Point with no money left. She had no food and no place to stay. The cubs were getting weaker every day. Lyra walked through the lower market areas. She stopped at each vendor's stall and begged for food. She offered to work in exchange for shelter. Every single person refused to help her. A tall Thaxian merchant with 4 arms spat on the ground near her feet. A Vorlean shopkeeper with scales instead of skin threatened to call security. Even the Delphim, who were usually kind to everyone, just shook their heads and looked away. Nobody wanted the bad luck that supposedly followed white Kalari. As the station's artificial lights dimmed to create nighttime, Lyra found herself in the maintenance sector. This was where the poorest people on the station lived. She sat down in a corner near a warm air vent. She wrapped her cubs tighter in the cloth as they made small crying sounds. She had not eaten in 2 days. Her body could not produce enough milk for the babies. The cubs needed food soon or they would die. A human walked past carrying a belt full of tools. His name was Danny. He was young, maybe 25 years old, with brown hair touched by sunlight. His hands were rough from working with machines. He noticed Lyra sitting in the corner and stopped walking. Most humans on the station had learned to follow the beliefs of the older alien species, especially if they wanted to do business and make money. But Danny had only arrived at Meridian Point 3 months ago. He was new to all of this. He did not see a cursed creature. He saw a mother with hungry children. He walked slowly toward Lyra. Her ears went flat against her head. Her body tensed up, ready to protect her cubs from danger. Danny held up both hands to show he meant no harm. He spoke in broken galactic common, the language most aliens used to talk to each other. His Earth accent was thick and clumsy. "You okay? You look like you need help." Lyra stared at him with wide golden eyes. She searched his face for lies or cruelty. She found neither. Her voice came out hoarse and dry from lack of water. "My cubs are dying. No one will help us. We are white-furred. We are cursed." Danny's face showed confusion. "Cursed? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." "Wait here." He walked away quickly. Lyra's heart beat fast with fear. Had she made a mistake trusting this strange alien? But Danny came back after several minutes. He carried a bundle in his arms. There was a thermal blanket, several packages of food, and a container of clean water. He set everything down carefully in front of her. "Here, eat. Get your strength back." Lyra's hands shook as she reached for the water. "Why? Why would you help me when no one else will?" Danny shrugged his shoulders as if the answer was simple and clear. "Because you need help. And because where I come from, we don't judge mothers and babies by the color of their fur. We judge people by what they do, not what they look like." Lyra drank the water slowly. It was the best thing she had tasted in days. She opened one of the food packages and ate while the cubs nursed, finally getting the nutrition they desperately needed. Danny sat down against the opposite wall, giving her space but staying nearby. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra. And these are Kale and Nira." She looked down at her cubs with love in her eyes. "I'm Danny, from Earth. Been here 3 months working as a technician. You are very far from home. Yeah, well, I wanted to see the galaxy. Turns out the galaxy's kinda messed up. Danny crossed his arms. Your people really think white fur is bad? Lyra nodded slowly. It has been our way for thousands of years. White-furred Kalari appear maybe once in 50,000 births. We are killed as babies or sent away to live alone on empty planets. The council says we carry genetic damage. They say we bring death and sickness to others. That's barbaric, Danny said flatly, and probably not even true. It does not matter if it is true. It is the law. Danny was quiet for a moment. Where I come from, we used to have stupid laws too. We used to hurt people just because they looked different. We got over it eventually. Your people need to get over it too. I do not think that will happen in my lifetime. Maybe not, but at least you and your cubs are alive right now. That's what matters. Over the next few days, Danny came back to check on Lyra whenever he had free time from work. He brought more food and medical supplies that he managed to get from the station's dispensaries. He brought blankets and toys for the cubs. Most importantly, he brought conversation and hope. The cubs grew stronger with regular meals. Kale was brave and curious, always trying to climb out of the nest Danny had helped build from scrap materials. Nira was quieter and more careful, watching everything with her big eyes. Danny told Lyra about Earth and about a place called Nebraska where he grew up. It was covered in grass that went on forever. Lyra told him about the Kalari homeworld with its silver cities and ancient temples. She told him about her mate who had died before the cubs were born. She told him about running away in fear and shame. You got nothing to be ashamed of, Danny said firmly. You're protecting your kids. That makes you a good mother, not a bad one. But their peace did not last long. Word spread through the station's Kalari community that a white-furred female and her cubs were hiding in the maintenance sector. A group of Kalari merchants and travelers demanded that station security find Lyra and hand her over to Kalari authorities. The station administrator, an alien named Quex, decided to cooperate. He wanted to keep good relations with the powerful Kalari Trade Consortium. Danny learned about this through a friend who worked in the administrative offices. He ran to find Lyra during his lunch break. His face was serious and worried. They're coming for you. Tomorrow morning, security is going to search this whole sector. They're going to give you and the cubs to the Kalari officials. Lyra's face went pale under her white fur. Then it is over. I knew I could not run forever. No way. We're getting you off this station. How? I have no money. No ship captain will take us. I have some savings. Not much, but enough. There's a transport ship leaving for the frontier colonies tomorrow evening. The rules are less strict out there. You could disappear and start a new life. Lyra stared at him in shock. You would spend your money to save us? Yeah, I would. Danny's jaw was tight with determination. But we need to move fast and stay hidden until the ship leaves. What Danny did not tell Lyra was the full truth. He had been saving money for years to buy his own ship someday. That was his dream, to explore the galaxy on his own terms. Using his savings to help Lyra would mean giving up that dream, maybe for many years. He would have to start over from nothing, but when he looked at the two small cubs playing with a piece of scrap metal, batting it back and forth with tiny paws, the choice seemed easy. Some things mattered more than dreams. Some things mattered more than money. The next morning came too quickly. Danny called his supervisor and said he was sick. It was the first time he had missed work since arriving at Meridian Point. He felt bad about lying, but he had more important things to worry about. He went to Lyra's hiding spot in the maintenance sector before dawn. The station's security teams would start their search soon. They needed to move fast. I studied the station's layout when I first got here, Danny explained as he helped Lyra pack the few things she had. There are maintenance tunnels that most people don't know about. We can use those to stay ahead of security. Lyra held her cubs close. Kale seemed to sense the tension and stayed quiet for once. Nira buried her face in her mother's fur. I am afraid, Lyra admitted. Me too, Danny said honestly. But being afraid doesn't mean we stop. It just means we're doing something that matters. They moved through the dark tunnels under the station. Danny led the way with a small light. The tunnels were cramped and smelled like oil and old metal. Sometimes they heard footsteps above them as security teams walked through the corridors overhead. Each time they froze and waited in silence until the danger passed. Danny had brought food and water in a bag. Every few hours they stopped so Lyra could rest and feed the cubs. The babies were surprisingly quiet, as if they understood that making noise would put them all in danger. How did you learn about these tunnels? Lyra asked during one of their rest stops. I'm an engineer. I like to know how things work. When I got here, I spent my free time exploring and mapping the station. My coworkers thought I was weird. Danny smiled slightly. Guess that weirdness is paying off now. You are a strange human, Danny, but a good one. They kept moving. The hours dragged on. Danny checked his watch frequently. The transport ship would start boarding passengers at 6 in the evening. They had to reach the docking sector by then without being caught. Around midday, they heard voices in the tunnel ahead. Security had expanded their search to include the maintenance areas. Danny quickly led Lyra down a side passage. They squeezed into a narrow space behind some old machinery and waited. 2 security officers walked past, talking in bored voices about how this was a waste of time. When the officers were gone, Danny let out a breath he had been holding. That had been too close. By late afternoon, they finally reached the section of tunnels near the docking bays. Danny found a spot where they could wait safely until boarding time. He pulled out the travel documents he had purchased the night before. I used a fake name for you, he explained. I listed your fur color as silver. The ship's crew probably won't check too carefully. They're a civilian transport, not official government. Lyra took the documents with shaking hands. Along with the papers, Danny gave her a credit chip. This has the rest of my savings on it. It should be enough to get you settled once you reach the frontier colonies. Find a place to live, buy supplies, maybe get some work. Danny, this is too much. I cannot take everything you have. You can and you will. Those cubs need a chance at life. This money gives them that chance. Danny's voice was firm. The frontier is different from here. Lots of different species living together. Fewer rules, less prejudice. You'll be safe there. Lyra looked at him with tears in her golden eyes. In Kalari culture, showing emotion like this was considered weak and shameful. But she did not care anymore about those old rules. Those rules had condemned her children to death. How can I ever repay you? You don't owe me anything. Just take care of Kale and Nira. Raise them to be good people. That's all the payment I need. The time came to move to the docking bay. Danny led them through one final tunnel that opened near the passenger boarding area. The transport ship called the Wandering Star sat at its docking port. It was old and battered, with patches of mismatched metal where repairs had been made over the years. But it was running and it was leaving, and that was all that mattered. Danny watched from a distance as Lyra joined the line of passengers boarding the ship. She wore a hood that partially covered her white fur. She kept her head down and held the cubs close. The crew member checking documents barely glanced at her papers before waving her through. She was almost safe. Just a few more steps. Then a voice called out behind Danny. There, that's the human who helped her. Danny turned to see 3 Kalari merchants pointing at him. Behind them were 2 station security officers. His heart sank. He had been spotted. Sir, you need to come with us, one of the officers said. Danny glanced back at the docking port. Lyra had made it onto the ship. The airlock was still open but would seal soon. She was looking back at him through the crowd, her eyes wide with fear. Danny made a quick decision. He started walking toward the security officers, then suddenly bolted in the opposite direction. The officers chased after him, shouting for him to stop. The Kalari merchants scattered. Danny ran through the docking sector, leading the officers away from the transport ship. He knew these corridors well from his work. He turned corners and ducked through doorways, staying just ahead of his pursuers. Behind him, he heard the announcement that the Wandering Star was departing. The airlock had sealed. Lyra and the cubs were safe. Danny slowed down and let the security officers catch up to him. There was no point in running anymore. He had accomplished what he needed to do. The officers grabbed his arms and put restraints on his wrists. You're in serious trouble, human. Yeah, I figured, Danny said, breathing hard from the run. They took him to the administrative offices. Station Administrator Quex was waiting. His amphibian skin turned dark purple with anger. His 4 arms gestured wildly as he spoke. Do you have any idea what you have done? The Kalari Consortium is threatening to pull all their business from this station. You have created a diplomatic incident. Danny stood straight and met Quex's bulging eyes without looking away. I helped a mother and her children escape persecution. I would do it again. Your employment is terminated immediately. You are also banned from all consortium-affiliated stations in this sector. You have 48 hours to leave Meridian Point. Danny nodded. He had expected this. Can I go pack my things? Security will escort you. You are not to be left unsupervised. They took him back to his small quarters. Danny packed his clothes and few personal belongings while two security officers watched. Some of his coworkers came by. A few whispered words of support. Others called him a fool who had thrown away his career for nothing. One visitor was different. Her name was Sella, a Delphim trader. The Delphim were crystalline beings who looked like living gemstones. Sella's facets glittered in the light as she checked to make sure no one was listening at the door. "What you did was stupid," Sella said, her voice like wind chimes. "It was also very brave." "Thanks, I think. I want to tell you something that most species do not know. The Delphim keep historical records going back thousands of years. We remember things that others have forgotten." Sella's colors shifted to a deep blue. The Kalari were not always the way they are now. 15,000 years ago, they had many different fur colors: white, black, brown, spotted, striped. They accepted all variations. Danny stopped packing. What changed? A plague, a genetic disease that almost destroyed their entire species. Only the silver and gold Kalari survived, or so their records say. In their fear and trauma, they began to see any other color as a sign the plague was returning. Fear became superstition. Superstition became law. So white Kalari aren't actually defective? The opposite is true. Recent genetic studies, which the Kalari government keeps secret, show that white-furred Kalari have stronger immune systems. They have greater genetic diversity. They represent what the Kalari were before the plague nearly killed them all. Lyra and her cubs, they're not cursed. They're the future of their species. Yes, but only if they survive long enough to prove it. Sella moved toward the door. I tell you this because you deserve to know that what you did mattered. Every act of courage against injustice sends ripples through the galaxy. Your ripples have already begun. After Sella left, Danny sat on his bunk thinking about what she had said. He thought about Lyra somewhere out in space, heading toward the frontier regions. He thought about Kale and Nira growing up in exile from their own people just because of how they looked. He made a decision. He was done with Meridian Point, done with the core sectors of the galaxy where old prejudices still ruled. He would go to the frontier, too. Out there, people were building something new. Danny used his last few credits to book passage on a colony ship heading to the outer reaches. The ship was called the New Dawn. It was old and crowded, full of humans and aliens all looking for a fresh start. There were families with children, young people seeking adventure, old people wanting one last chance at something better. The journey took 3 months. Danny worked in the ship's engineering section to earn his keep. He fixed broken systems and kept the aging vessel running. He made friends with other passengers. There was a human woman named Katie who was running from a bad marriage on Earth. A Vorleen named Crix who had lost everything in a business deal. A family of Delphim seeking a place where their children could grow up free. They all had stories. They had all been hurt, or disappointed, or shunned by the core worlds. They were all hoping the frontier would be different. The colony ship New Dawn finally arrived at a planet called New Terra, after 3 long months of travel. Danny stood at the viewport and watched the blue and green world grow larger. It looked like Earth, but wilder, untamed. This would be his new home. The ship landed at a settlement called Haven City, though calling it a city was generous. It was really just a collection of prefabricated buildings and temporary shelters. Construction equipment was everywhere. The colony was only 2 years old and still growing. Danny found work quickly with the Colonial Engineering Corps. They needed people who could fix things and build infrastructure. His skills were valuable here. Within a week, he had a job in a small room in a worker's dormitory. The work was hard but satisfying. He helped install power generators, build water treatment facilities, and repair equipment that broke down in the harsh frontier conditions. New Terra had storms that made Earth weather look calm. The machinery took a beating, but Danny liked it here. The people were different from those on Meridian Point. Nobody cared about your past or where you came from. They cared about whether you did your job and helped your neighbors. There were humans, Delphim, Vorleen, and dozens of other species all working together. 3 months after arriving, Danny was supervising a power grid installation when Katie, the woman he had met on the ship, came running up to him. She worked as an administrative assistant now. "Danny, you need to see this." She held out a data pad. "What is it?" "There's a delegation coming from Sanctuary. That's the neighboring planet in this system. They want to talk about setting up trade routes between our worlds. Danny wiped grease from his hands. Okay, so why are you telling me? Katie pulled up an image on the pad. Because one of the delegates is Kalari, a white-furred Kalari, and according to the notes, she specifically asked if a human named Danny was living on New Terra. Danny's breath caught in his throat. He looked at the image. Even after 7 years, he recognized her immediately. Lyra. And beside her in the photo were 2 young Kalari, nearly adult now, with white fur marked by blue stripes. When do they arrive? Tomorrow. The ship lands at noon. That night, Danny barely slept. He kept thinking about that night on Meridian Point, about the choice he had made. He had wondered so many times over the years what had happened to Lyra and the Cubs. Now he was about to find out. The next day, Danny arrived at the spaceport early. He stood at the edge of the landing pad, his hand shaking slightly. He felt nervous like a kid waiting for exam results. The sanctuary delegation's ship landed smoothly. The airlock opened and several figures emerged. Lyra was among them. She wore formal robes now, deep blue with silver thread, the kind important people wore, but when her golden eyes found Danny in the small crowd, all formality disappeared. She ran toward him. Danny met her halfway. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other. 7 years was a long time. You found me, Danny said, his voice rough with emotion. It took time. I had to search many colony worlds, but I never stopped looking. I had to thank you properly. Kale and Nira approached more cautiously than their mother. They were beautiful, Danny thought. Their white fur with blue stripes was striking, not shameful. Kale was tall and athletic-looking. Nira had intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. These cannot be the same tiny cubs I saw 7 years ago, Danny said. They grew. Lyra laughed and cried at the same time. Because of you, they grew up free. They grew up proud of who they are. The delegation had meetings with New Terra's Colonial Council, so Danny did not get to talk with Lyra much that first day. But that evening, she came to find him at his small house on the outskirts of Haven City. They sat on his porch and watched New Terra's sunset. The sky turned purple and orange, colors Earth never had. Lyra told him her story. She had arrived on Sanctuary 7 years ago with almost nothing. The colony there was even more diverse than New Terra. Nobody cared about fur color or ancient traditions. She had found work in warehouses at first, loading and unloading cargo. Then someone discovered she could speak 6 languages. She became a translator, helping different species communicate. Eventually, she started working for the colonial administration. She helped refugees from all over the galaxy find homes and jobs on Sanctuary. She became someone important, someone who made a difference. The cubs had grown up free and happy. Kyle had become an advocate for displaced people, helping others who had fled persecution just like his mother had. Nira had studied genetics, researching the very traits that made white Kalari special. Nira proved something amazing, Lyra said with pride in her voice. She proved that white Kalari are not defective. We have stronger immune systems. We resist disease better than silver or gold Kalari. We are not cursed. We are evolved. So you are here just to set up trade? Danny asked. Trade, yes, but also something more important. We want to build an alliance. Lyra's expression became serious. More white Kalari are escaping from the homeworlds every month. Word has spread that there are places in the frontier where they can live without fear. We are creating a network, a new community, but we need allies who understand what we are trying to do. You want New Terra to officially recognize white Kalari as refugees? Yes. And we want to establish a program to bring Kalari cubs here to your colony and others like it. We want them to get education and opportunities they would never have in traditional Kalari space. We want humans to help us teach our people that there is another way to live. Danny thought about this. Why humans specifically? We have our own problems with prejudice. Because a human showed me kindness when the entire galaxy turned away. Because humans seem to see people as individuals, not just as members of a species. Because you judge by actions, not by appearance. Lyra looked at him directly. One human changed my life and the lives of my children. Imagine what many humans could do for many Kalari. The next day, Lyra and her delegation met with New Terra's Colonial Council. Danny was invited to attend as a witness. The council members listened carefully to Lyra's proposal. Many of them were humans who had left Earth for various reasons. They understood what it meant to flee your home looking for something better. After 2 hours of discussion, the council voted. The result was unanimous. New Terra would officially recognize white Kalari as protected refugees. They would partner with Sanctuary to create the educational program Lyra had proposed. That evening, Danny invited Lyra, Kale, and Nira to his house for dinner. It was simple food, nothing fancy, but they ate together and shared stories. Kale talked about the refugees he had helped. Nira explained her genetic research in terms Danny could understand. Lyra simply smiled, watching her children with love. "My mother told us what you did for us," Kale said at one point. "What you gave up." Danny waved his hand dismissively. "It was nothing. I made the money back eventually." "It was not nothing," Nira said quietly. "You changed the course of our lives. You changed history." "That seems dramatic," Danny protested. "Is it?" Lyra leaned forward. "Because of your actions, I survived. My cubs survived. We built a new life. We are now helping hundreds of others do the same. Nira's research is changing how the galaxy views genetic diversity. Kale's work has saved countless refugees, and it all traces back to one human who saw a desperate mother and chose to help. How is that not changing history?" Danny sat back, feeling overwhelmed. "I just did what anyone should do. But most do not," Kale said. "That is what makes it matter." They talked late into the night. Danny learned that there were now over 5,000 white Kalari living in the frontier regions. They had their own settlements, their own representatives in various colonial governments. They had found their voice, but the traditional Kalari consortium had not taken this well. They denounced the frontier colonies as havens for genetic deviants. They threatened sanctions and political pressure. They wanted all white Kalari returned to consortium control. "They cannot accept that we are thriving," Lyra said. "It challenges everything they believe. What will you do?" "We will continue to build our communities. We will continue to prove that we are not cursed or defective. And we will hope that eventually, even the consortium will have to accept the truth." Before the delegation left to return to Sanctuary, Nira gave Danny a gift. It was a data chip containing all her research on white Kalari genetics. "I want you to have this," she said. "You were the first person to treat us like we mattered. This research proves you were right to do so." Danny took the chip, not fully understanding its significance, but Lyra smiled knowingly. "Keep it safe. Someday, that research might be very important." As he watched their ship depart, heading back to Sanctuary, Danny felt something he had not felt in years. He felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. He had helped one family 7 years ago, not expecting anything in return. Now that simple act had rippled outward in ways he never imagined. He went back to his job, back to his simple life. But he kept the data chip Nira had given him in a safe place, and sometimes late at night he read through the research. He did not understand all the technical terms, but the basic message was clear. White Kalari were not mistakes. They were not cursed. They were the future of their species, if that species could overcome its own fear and prejudice. 10 years passed since Danny had last seen Lyra. New Terra had grown from a rough frontier settlement into a real colony world with cities and farms and roads connecting everything. The population had swelled to over 200,000 people from dozens of different species. Danny was now 42 years old. He had worked his way up to chief engineer for the southern settlements. His job was to make sure the power stayed on, the water stayed clean, and the buildings stayed standing. It was hard work but rewarding. He had helped build something real and lasting. He had a small house on the outskirts of Haven City. He had friends from many different worlds. He had dated a few people over the years, though nothing had worked out long term. His life was good, quiet, peaceful, but he still thought about Lyra and the cubs sometimes. He wondered how they were doing, if they were safe, if they were happy. The frontier regions had grown, and he had heard that the white Kalari population was now over 10,000. They had their own towns and communities. But he had never tried to contact Lyra. He figured she had moved on with her life, and he did not want to intrude. Then one day, everything changed. Danny was at a construction site supervising the installation of a new power grid. It was hot and dusty work. His assistant Katie, now a full engineer herself, came running up with a data pad in her hands. "Boss, you need to see this right now." Danny wiped sweat from his forehead. "What is it?" "There is a delegation arriving from Sanctuary tomorrow. They want to talk about establishing a permanent trade route between our planets." Katie pulled up a file on the pad. "One of the delegates is Kalari, white-furred, and she specifically asked if a human named Danny was living on New Terra." Danny's heart started beating faster. "Show me." Katie turned the pad around. There was Lyra, older but still recognizable, and beside her were Kale and Nira, now fully grown adults. They looked confident and professional in their formal clothes. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow," Danny said quietly. "I need to meet that ship." The next morning, Danny arrived at the spaceport early. He stood near the landing pad wearing his best shirt, which was not saying much. He felt nervous like he had not felt in years. His hands kept fidgeting with his belt. The sanctuary ship landed smoothly. The airlock opened and the delegation emerged. Lyra was there, dressed in official robes that marked her as someone important. When she saw Danny, her face lit up with joy. She walked quickly toward him, then ran the last few steps. They embraced like old friends, which they were. Danny found himself laughing and not quite sure why. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was happiness. Maybe it was just the absurdity of life bringing them back together after so many years. "You are still here," Lyra said, pulling back to look at him. "Where else would I be?" Danny grinned. Kyle and Nira approached. They were no longer the tiny cubs or even the young adults he had met before. They were in their prime now, strong and capable. Kyle had the bearing of a leader. Nira had the focused intensity of a scientist. "You are the one," Kale said, studying Danny's face. "You are the one who saved us." "I just helped your mother get on a ship," Danny said, embarrassed. "You gave us our lives," Nira corrected him gently. The delegation had official meetings to attend. But that evening, Lyra came to find Danny. They sat in his backyard watching the sunset, just like they had done years ago. "Why are you really here?" Danny asked. Lyra was quiet for a moment. "Things are changing in the galaxy. The Kalari Consortium is facing pressure from many sides. Younger Kalari, even those with traditional fur colors, are questioning the old ways. They see how we have thrived in the frontier. They want to know why their government treats us like we are diseased." "That sounds good." "It is good, but it also creates danger. The consortium is trying to maintain control. They have announced they are sending a diplomatic mission to the frontier regions. They want to negotiate for the return of what they call displaced Kalari citizens." Danny felt a chill run down his spine. "They want you to go back?" "They want all of us. Over 10,000 white Kalari. They are framing it as a humanitarian mission. They claim we have been led astray and need to be brought home for our own good." "That is ridiculous. Everyone here is free to leave whenever they want. You know that." "I know that. But the consortium is putting pressure on the human government back on Earth. They are threatening trade sanctions and political isolation. The consortium has a lot of economic power." Danny stood up and paced. "We cannot let them do this. I do not know if we can stop them. The colonial governments out here are new and weak. We do not have the political strength to stand up to that kind of pressure from the core worlds." Danny thought for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Maybe we cannot fight them through official channels, but we can make sure the whole galaxy knows what is really happening. We need to go public. Really public." Over the next few weeks, Danny and Lyra worked together to organize what they called the Freedom Summit. They contacted journalists from every major news network in the galaxy. They brought in scientists to present Nira's research on white Kalari genetics. They arranged for white Kalari from across the frontier to come and tell their stories about why they left traditional space and what their lives were like now. Most importantly, they made sure everything would be broadcast live across the Galactic Communication Network. The summit was held in Haven City's largest auditorium, a building that could hold 5,000 people. Thousands more watched from outside on big screens. Millions across the galaxy tuned in to watch remotely. Danny stood backstage watching as Lyra walked to the podium. She had become a powerful speaker over the years. She knew how to hold an audience's attention. "I stand before you as a Kalari who was condemned to die because of the color of my fur," Lyra began. Her voice was clear and strong. "I stand before you as a mother who was told her children were wrong, that they should not exist. I stand before you as someone who found hope in an unexpected place, in the kindness of a stranger who did not see my fur color. He saw my humanity." She told the history of white Kalari persecution. She explained the false science that justified it. She presented the real research that proved white Kalari were not only healthy, but important to their species' survival. Other speakers followed. Kale talked about the damage caused by discrimination. He shared stories of families torn apart, of children who grew up believing they were cursed. Nira presented her genetic findings with charts and data that made the truth impossible to deny. White Kalari had stronger immune systems, greater genetic diversity, better resistance to disease. Other White Kalari came forward to share personal stories. A mother who had fled in the night just like Lyra. A father who had watched his cub taken away by temple guards. A young adult who had grown up in isolation told every day that she was defective. But the moment that truly captured the galaxy's attention came near the end of the summit. A small Kalari cub walked onto the stage. She could not have been more than 5 years old. Her fur was pure white without any markings. She carried a stuffed toy animal in her arms. "My name is Tira," she said in a tiny voice that barely reached the microphone. "I was born here on New Terra. My parents ran away from the homeworld before I was born. I have never seen their planet. I have never met my grandparents. But I am happy here. I have friends who are humans and Delphim and Vorleen. No one treats me like I am bad. I just want to stay here where people are nice to me." The auditorium was silent. Many people were crying. The image of that small cub with her white fur and her stuffed toy became the symbol of everything the movement stood for. 2 days later, the consortium's diplomatic mission arrived. It was led by a high-ranking official named Vorin. He was old guard Kalari with golden fur and traditional views. He met with New Terra's governor, a human woman named Lisa Rodriguez, in a closed meeting room. Vorin demanded the immediate return of all White Kalari to consortium custody. He used legal language and diplomatic pressure. He made threats about trade sanctions and political consequences. Governor Rodriguez listened politely. Then she slid a data pad across the table to Vorin. "That is a petition signed by 9,847 White Kalari currently living in the frontier regions. Every signature is verified with biometric scans. Every single one states they have no desire to return to consortium space and consider themselves free citizens of their colony worlds." Vorin's fur stood on end with anger. "They have been brainwashed by human propaganda, have they?" Rodriguez pulled up footage from the Freedom Summit. The whole galaxy watched them speak freely about their experiences. The whole galaxy saw your species' own genetic research proving they are healthy. And the whole galaxy saw that little cub ask to stay where people treat her with kindness. This is an internal Kalari matter. It was internal, right up until you made it galactic by demanding we force people to go somewhere they do not want to go. That is not how we do things in the frontier. The negotiations failed. Vorin and his delegation returned to consortium space with nothing accomplished. But the damage to the consortium's reputation was severe. Public opinion across the galaxy had turned against them. Many species began questioning their relationships with a government that persecuted its own people based on how they looked. 5 more years passed after the Freedom Summit. The frontier regions became known throughout the galaxy as a place where people who did not fit elsewhere could find a home. New Terra and Sanctuary grew into major colony worlds. Their populations included refugees from dozens of planets, pioneers seeking new opportunities, and dreamers who wanted to build something better. The White Kalari population in the frontier had grown to nearly 15,000. They had their own settlements scattered across multiple worlds. They had representatives in colonial governments. They had schools where cubs learned they were not cursed or defective, just different. Most importantly, they had hope for the future. Nira's genetic research had been published in every major scientific journal across the galaxy. The evidence was clear and undeniable. White Kalari had stronger immune systems, better resistance to radiation, and greater genetic diversity than their silver or gold-furred cousins. They were not evolutionary mistakes. They were the future. The traditional Kalari consortium had responded with anger at first. They denounced the frontier colonies as places of moral decay and genetic corruption. They threatened trade sanctions and political isolation. But their power was fading. Younger Kalari, even those with traditional coloring, were questioning why their government persecuted people based on appearance. Within 2 years of the summit, 3 Kalari colony worlds declared independence from the consortium. They offered sanctuary to any White Kalari who wanted to live freely. Within 4 years, the consortium was forced to make a historic announcement. They would no longer actively persecute White Kalari, though white-furred citizens would be encouraged to live in designated areas for what they called mutual benefit and protection. It was not perfect. It was not full acceptance. But it was progress. Real, measurable progress. Danny watched all of this unfold from his home on New Terra. He was now 47 years old. His hair was starting to show gray at the temples. His hands were scarred from years of working with machinery. But he was healthy and content. He had become something of a legend in the frontier regions. The story of the human who had risked everything to save a Kalari mother and her cubs had spread far and wide. People told the story to their children as an example of courage and compassion. Statues had been erected in some settlements showing a human and a Kalari standing together. Danny hated the attention. He insisted he had just done what anyone should do. But people kept treating him like a hero anyway. One afternoon, Danny was in his workshop repairing a broken power regulator when Lyra arrived without warning. She looked upset. Her ears were flat against her skull and her tail swished with agitation. "What is wrong?" Danny asked, setting down his tools. "The consortium is trying something new. They have approached the Earth government directly. They want Earth to pressure all human colonies in the frontier to stop accepting white Kalari refugees. They are offering very favorable trade deals in exchange." Danny felt anger rising in his chest. Can they do that? Earth's government is considering it. The consortium has a lot to offer: technology, resources, access to markets. Some politicians on Earth think it is worth sacrificing a few thousand refugees to gain economic advantages. That is wrong. Yes, but wrong things happen every day when people put profit over principles. Lyra sat down heavily. "I do not know if we can fight this. Earth has authority over its colonies. If they order the colonial governments to stop accepting refugees, the governors might have to comply." Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled grimly. "We beat them once by going public. We can do it again. But this time we need to reach Earth directly. We need to show the people of Earth what is really at stake." Over the next month, Danny and Lyra worked with others to create a documentary. They interviewed white Kalari refugees about their experiences. They showed footage of thriving communities in the frontier. They included Nira's research explained in simple terms anyone could understand. They showed children playing together, humans and Kalari and other species, learning and growing without prejudice. The final section of the documentary featured Tira, the young cub who had spoken at the Freedom Summit. She was now 10 years old. She spoke directly to the camera in flawless English, a language she had learned growing up on New Terra. "My parents ran away from their home so I could be born free. They gave up everything they knew so I could have a better life. The human who helped them did not know me. I was not even born yet. But he helped anyway because it was the right thing to do. Now some people on Earth want to make it so other cubs like me cannot find safety. They want to send refugees back to places where they will be hurt or killed. I do not understand why anyone would do that. I thought humans were supposed to be kind." The documentary was released across Earth's communication networks. It went viral within days. Millions of people watched it. Social media filled with discussions and debates. Religious leaders, ethicists, and ordinary citizens spoke out against the proposed deal with the consortium. The politicians who had supported the agreement found themselves facing angry constituents. Protests erupted in major cities across Earth. Young people especially were outraged at the idea of trading away refugee protections for economic gain. Within 2 weeks, the Earth government announced they would not make any agreement with the consortium that involved refugees. Human colonies would continue to operate under their own authority regarding immigration and asylum policies. The consortium's gambit had failed again. Danny watched the news coverage from his house. Katie was there along with several other friends. They were celebrating with drinks and food. "You did it again," Katie said, raising her glass. "You changed the course of history." "I just helped make a documentary," Danny protested. "You keep saying you just did this or just did that. But somehow your just doing things keeps changing the galaxy." Lyra arrived later that evening. She looked tired but happy. They sat on Danny's porch watching the stars come out in New Terra's night sky. "Kale wants to run for the Colonial Senate," Lyra said. "He thinks he can win. He probably can. He is smart, and people like him." Nira has been offered a position at the University of New Terra. She will be teaching genetics and continuing her research. "That is good. She deserves it." They were quiet for a while. Then Lyra spoke again. "Do you ever regret it? Giving up your savings that night on Meridian Point? Giving up your dream of owning a ship?" Danny thought about the question. "No, I got something better than a ship. I got to be part of something that mattered. I got to help change things for the better. You changed my life. You changed my cubs' lives. You changed the lives of thousands of white Kalari who found freedom because of what you started. I just helped one person. You and the others did the real work. You helped the right person at the right time. That made all the difference. More years passed. Danny grew older. His hair turned fully gray. His joints started to ache on cold mornings. He eventually retired from his engineering work and spent his time mentoring younger engineers and tinkering in his workshop. The frontier regions continued to grow and prosper. The white Kalari population spread across dozens of worlds. Kale did win his Senate seat and became a voice for refugee rights across the colonies. Nira's research led to breakthroughs in genetic medicine that helped many species. Lyra became an elder stateswoman, respected across the frontier for her wisdom and compassion. Even the Kalari consortium slowly began to change. The old guard died off or retired. Younger Kalari, who had grown up seeing images of thriving white Kalari communities, started questioning the old prejudices. It would take generations, but the attitudes were shifting. Danny lived to see the day when the first white Kalari was born on a consortium world and allowed to live openly without persecution. It happened on a colony world that had broken away from central control. The cubs' parents held a celebration and invited representatives from across the galaxy. Danny received an invitation but was too old to travel by then. Instead, he sent a message that was read at the celebration. It was short and simple. Congratulations on your beautiful child. May they grow up in a galaxy that judges people by their character and not their appearance. May they never know the fear their grandparents knew. And may they always remember that change begins with simple acts of kindness from ordinary people who choose to do what is right. When Danny died at the age of 72, his funeral was attended by thousands. White Kalari came from across the frontier to pay their respects. Clara spoke at the service, her voice strong despite her own advanced age. This human did not think he was special. He did not think he was a hero. He just saw someone who needed help and he helped them. That simple choice rippled outward across the galaxy in ways he never imagined. He taught us that anyone can make a difference. Anyone can choose compassion over indifference. Anyone can change the world. They buried Danny on New Terra in a cemetery overlooking Haven City. The city had grown into a metropolis of over 1 million people from dozens of species. It was a far cry from the rough settlement he had arrived at decades earlier. His grave marker was simple. It gave his name, his birth and death dates in a single line. He saw people, not differences. But the real memorial to Danny was not made of stone. It lived in the